Recently, I did a video on Season 1 of Multiverse Match as a way for me to brush up on the series before the second season started. And now that the Season 2 premiere is out, I figured I'd review it to help spread the word. So, Mewtwo vs Tetsuo, a match that I really like, much more than either of them versus Magneto. And I would genuinely pop off if Death Battle announced it. I'd love to see them cover Akira, and I'd love for Mewtwo to get an episode that isn't hot trash. A custom track that incorporates the music from both series, a hand-drawn transformation for Mega Mewtwo, some nice custom visual effects, and a really gruesome and graphic hand-drawn death could make for a really special episode. But of course, expecting an indie versus show with a shoestring budget run by people who don't have professional experience to have any of that really isn't reasonable. I gotta bring this up in case people go into the comments asking why I say aspects of this episode are good, but aspects of Death Battle episodes I don't like that are technically better aren't. I'm not gonna hold Multiverse Match and Death Battle to the same standards, that would be ridiculous. One is a passion project run by a group of friends, and one is a professionally made show with a budget done by people who do it for a living. So any moments of janky animation and such won't bother me quite as much here. I just felt I had to get that clarification out of the way first. So how was the episode overall? Well, I really liked it. It's one of my new favourite episodes of the show. The analysis might be my favourite one they've done. There are way more attempts at jokes than usual, and they all landed pretty well for me. I don't recall any that I found particularly unfunny like the ones in Parappa vs Ulala. It also covers the characters better than pretty much every other episode, both in terms of their stories and their stats, since this time around they actually put concrete numbers for the characters instead of just placing them at a vague level, and it's done for both of them unlike in Donald vs Daffy and Kid vs Lupin. They even go for a more unique approach at points that I don't recall seeing any other versus show do, where they talk about the real life impact that the two had on their series' success among other things. It made it stand out a lot more. Also in the part where they talk about how Akira helped make most anime more readily available, Brandon included footage of One Punch Man, Detective Conan, and Yu Yu Hakusho, which are mine, Ribbit's, and his favourite anime series respectively. Pretty much nobody outside of our friend group will notice that, but it's a nice touch that I appreciate. There's not really much more for me to say there. Discussing whether or not the stats are right has never really been something I cared about. Your mileage will vary depending on what you believe for both, I don't really care. What I do care about though is the animation, and Max has certainly improved since his last fight on the show. This isn't the over-the-top bombastic spectacle that Donald vs Daffy was, but it didn't really need to be to accomplish what it set out to be. The fight conveys the character's speed better than most of Max's other fights, and I think the after-images really helped with that. And the action is well choreographed, though the very limited Tetsuo sprites clearly held it back in regards to what Max was actually able to do with them. Even if I wasn't told ahead of time, this bit at the end with Tetsuo backhanding the energy barrier would have been a dead giveaway. Though they aren't limited as much on the Mewtwo side, as they have access to Mega Mewtwo Y sprites that Death Battle and Crossover X didn't at the time of their Mewtwo fights. So Mega Mewtwo actually gets to do stuff this time around, you love to see it. What really sells the fight for me though is the writing. This is a contender for the best written episode of the show in my eyes. I really like the dynamic between the two in regards to the banter. Mewtwo is more calm and collected while Tetsuo is freaking the fuck out the entire fight. And they have exchanges that go beyond just mindlessly yelling insults at each other. The scene where they read each other's minds and talk shit based on each other's past experiences and their very existence is great. And Mewtwo has some amazing closing remarks as he chokes Tetsuo out in what is an insanely brutal death. I think it would have been sold better if Tetsuo's head got ripped off or twisted all the way around instead of exploded, but regardless, the build-up alone is enough to make this one stand out compared to every other death that the show has done. Apparently Max had no idea that Jeffersaurus was going to record audio of Tetsuo getting strangled, but it's what really helped sell the moment. The rest of their performance is still really good. They're not an exact one-to-one replication of the original Joshua Seth performance obviously, but I feel they captured the spirit of the character really well. And Nemesis did great as Mewtwo, even outdoing his performance on Battle Royale, though it's kind of an unfair comparison since this time he's actually given good dialogue to work with. Overall, I'd say this episode has my favourite voice acting in this series. Voice for Hire is still sitting at the top with their individual Daffy performance. but Mewtwo vs Tetsuo I feel has a higher average level of quality in that regard. It's comparing two great performances to a basically perfect one coupled with a not so great one. Of course, the animation isn't clear of flaws by any means, but my big issues with it are fairly few and far between. There are some moments where the sound effects feel really out of place or fail to sell the impact of an attack for me. Mewtwo freezes Tetsuo with what is definitely not an actual Pokemon move, and Mewtwo's arm getting ripped off at the end doesn't have the impact that it realistically should. There's no scream or change to its voice, there's no time to let it sink in, and then Mewtwo just swaps out the arm that got ripped off. Whoops. But yeah, overall I had a really great time with this episode. It's made me really excited for the rest of the season, and knowing what matches that the season has in store, you guys have a lot of fun episodes to look forward to.
When are we doing All for One versus the Annihilator? It's like, what, Mighty Mad or something? Very soon, Biff, we just make the sprites and we'll get on it.
Hooray!
Woohoo!
Including one I may or may not be involved with, hopefully. As for this episode, it's sitting really high up on my ranking of the series right now. Definitely in my top 5. I'd give it an 8 out of 10, but I can totally see it climbing up to a 9 on rewatches. It's a great time that I'd recommend to any fans of indie versus stuff. Brandon, Max and Duckle clearly had a lot of passion for the episode, and I think it all paid off in the end. If you haven't seen the episode, maybe give it a watch. Hopefully you'll like what you see. And this is where I'll wrap things up for now. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time when I review the iconic Among Us episode of Galaxy Grudge Match Mini.
We've been playing Among Us recently.
We're just a ragtag group of Among Us fans.
No, I was in medbay!
Wait, that's
He told me get scanned!
true. I saw him get scanned. I saw him get scanned. I did see that.